And we're back. Bits and Bytes podcast. We're excited to be here again. This is episode
17.
I just wanted to see you kind of like stroking over there.
Yeah.
Quick.
Yes, let's see out there.
Yep. 17, episode 17. It's crazy. We are approaching the number 20. That's awesome. And it's an exciting time here as we're doing these. We have a special couple guests with us today, one from ByteWorks and one from GHA. So just to level set everything, Bits and Bytes podcast, we created this so that we could bring on like-minded folks, industry experts, and share what's going on in the industry, because we find that peers grow and lead better from each other. And as we, dive into similar problems, chances are there's similar problems with other folks as well. Thank you for being here today, guys. We're really excited. I'm Matt Scott with my co-host,
Joey Wensler. It's an absolute honor to have the Georgia Hospital Association CIO, Stephen McWilliams, with us on the show. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not mention the one and only Michael Allshouse from ByteWorks LLC.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here today. Today, we're going to dig into some challenges in hospitals and the healthcare industry relating to IT. So before we get kind of into the meat of everything, Stephen, thanks for being here.
Thank you both for inviting me. And always looking forward to having conversations around our hospitals in the state because, healthy hospitals create healthy communities. And one day we may be a patient. And so we're going to want to have a hospital available for us during that crisis. So thank you again.
Yep, absolutely. Very relatable to us. And, while we're getting ready, Stephen, would you mind, maybe giving us a little bit of your background and, who you are just for the audience? I know we've had the pleasure to get to know you, maybe just a little recap of yourself just for the audience.
So, early on, I knew that technology, that was interesting to me. I was very curious about technology. And so early on, I would tinker with things. And so when the opportunity came up to go to school and learn about different things, I thought because I love technology, maybe I should keep that as my hobby and I go and focus on something else. So I actually went to school for my undergrad for a completely different thing. And while on that journey, I realized it doesn't matter if you're forced to do something that you love. Because you love it, it will never be really a forced thing. It will be you having a good time. And so when I started my master's program, I did focus on the technology aspect. And so that was my opportunity to prepare for opportunities that came my way. And so I actually started off in higher education. I actually started off at a university. I worked in the IT department and worked my way through the ranks there. And then when the opportunity came to come to Georgia at the Georgia Hospital Association, I thought it was a great way for me to continue to make a positive impact in the community. And so I've been at the Georgia Hospital Association for a little over 10 years at this point. Time flies. And so I've held a couple of different roles there. Right now, I'm currently the VP CIO of the organization. And so what that means is I'm over the operations and strategy. Our organization is focused on serving the over 150 hospital members in the state. And so we do advocacy. We're an advocacy group. And so what that means, we go and speak on behalf of our hospitals, allowing them to speak with one voice so that ultimately they're able to serve their patients. And so, I'm just excited to kind of see what is in the future for healthcare and how technology is going to impact healthcare. And that's what kind of drives me to continue to show up every day. And that's kind of my story.
Yeah, that's awesome. I bet in those 10 years that you've been there, you've seen a massive innovation change and how everything's leveraged. I think that's a really good place to maybe even start. In your perspective, where does technology play within hospitals and the healthcare systems?
Yeah, I would say technology at this point is a thread that permeates the whole hospital healthcare ecosystem. It is part of our experience as patients. And so we have come to rely on technology as new innovations come so that we can work efficiently, so that we can create automations, so that we ultimately reduce errors. We need to address burnout. And so, right now, I think I've been focused a lot on cybersecurity. As all of this new technology comes into play, we have to keep it secure. And the healthcare record is a target that bad actors are going after. And so keeping things secure is very important. Making sure we have the right workforce so that we're able to stand up and maintain all of this technology throughout the hospital is very important as well. And then obviously we want to make sure that the technology that we do deploy in the hospitals ultimately translates into patient care, patient safety. That's the challenge now, just making sure the data that we collect. I mean, right now we're talking big data. That's a big topic. AI is a big topic, and making sure that what we're doing as it relates to utilizing this technology to make sure it translates into the healthcare outcomes. It really takes all of us working together and being educated on how can we leverage some of this stuff and learning from one another.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I have to think that, and as we've had conversations as well with multiple healthcare facilities and industries, even to the simplisticness of it, the network, the foundational network, the consistency, the reliability, the resilience of the network at its simplest form is so important to everything that we're doing. I mean, healthcare specific, but also, every single other industry too. We've become so inept or desensitized like that Wi-Fi is just going to be there. That accessibility to the network is just going to be constant, and that's an expectation, like an ante into it all. And we don't realize that inconsistencies or instabilities, or to your point, cybersecurity vulnerabilities, is essentially the key to it all. Everything runs on top of that network. And so I'd be curious some of the challenges that you have with all of those hospitals in your kind of infrastructure and in your realm. They have to be at all different levels of their readiness to support everything that's going on. Is there inconsistencies in that? Tell me some of where what that looks like.
Yeah, and I think that that's a big point. Maybe in the past, people would have looked at some of this responsibility as being only an IT responsibility. But as we've kind of learned, as we all have seen cyber incidents increase, as we see new technologies when it comes to networking, it does take all of us to keep a hospital secure. And so, as I emphasize with our team, it is the people. We are the human firewall. We are the ones that all contribute in some way to make sure that we are keeping our patients' data safe, keeping our systems secure. And so it takes a lot of education. And so we're providing a lot of, we're doing some education through our organization for our hospitals, and also promote education for our members as well throughout the state, whether we're having events regionally or whether we're providing something that's for hospital leaders, just kind of reminding them that we together have to kind of work to kind of make sure that we are all working toward the same goal, which is our members. Education when it comes to new technology is also very important. So I think these types of podcasts where we're talking around, talking about, okay, so what are some of the latest trends as it relates to securing your network? What are some of the latest trends as it relates to accessibility? Like I know cellular service has been something that's been talked about. Satellite service has been something that's been talked about. Obviously, fiber has been out there for a while, but with some of the remote workers now at play and making sure that they have access to the network securely is very important, because all this plays into patient healthcare. When it's all said and done, one bad actor getting into one system and taking that down obviously has a ripple effect across the organization.
Yeah, no doubt.
Definitely want to touch more on the security aspect, but it seems like in today's security landscape, there's always another compliance requirement to meet. So, in light of all of these tech changes and shifts, how do you keep up with HIPAA per se under that purview?
Yeah, it's a challenge for some of our rural hospitals. When you don't have the type of workforce to be able to have one person doing this and one person doing that, you have people maybe wearing multiple hats. It can be a very challenging thing to keep up with some of the changes around security standards, around interoperability challenges, any of the regulatory changes that come through. If there's not money to support that effort, whether it's requiring new configurations, new software, conversions, we'd have to be able to support this and be mandating that and following that up with punitive fines. I'm not sure if that's actually going to solve the problem. I'm hopeful that, again, back to the education, we need to just make sure that everyone's informed and they get a chance to participate and give feedback when laws and changes are taking place, to get ahead of the curve so that whatever change we do, the intent is met through something that's realistic. Some of the work that I did last year focused on finding opportunities to offset when there was been a cyber incident, if there was a punitive fine that comes after that. If if an organization was following best practices, isn't there a way we can offset that cost or at least mitigate that cost because they were doing the best they can? That the incident itself is punishment. And so, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity here, I would say. But yeah, there's been some talks around changes around NIST 2.0 coming up. So just be to give feedback around that. And we'll know that there's some cyber performance goals that are been talked about as well. So just continue to see what opportunities we have to educate and then inform our legislators before they make decisions.
Yeah, that's great.
I wanted to build on something that you touched there because I think the dynamic is really interesting. There are all these emerging threats that are coming, and there are new technologies that have been developed to help protect against a lot of those threats. But the bigger piece here is these healthcare systems have to have funding in order to take advantage of that technology. You and I both know that some of the rural healthcare systems, even just in the Southeast, they don't have access to all the same resources that some of the big healthcare systems do. So I think a lot of the time we all get caught up in thinking these healthcare systems are cash cows and they have unlimited money that they could put towards cybersecurity defense. That's obviously not the case. So what do some of those rural parts of the country do to try and keep up to help protect themselves?
Yeah, very good point. Yeah. I think healthcare is a very unique industry where when you go and get service, you may not know exactly how much all this will cost, and vice versa. The hospital's taking on risk because they don't know if you can pay. And so that does impact the budgetary planning process. And obviously, when it comes to the different type of payers, you got insurance, you got private people that self-pay, or you have other programs that help to cover those costs there. It's just a continued challenge. Our hospitals do have some indigent care, we give the care away. What we try to do at the Hospital Association, we do try to find opportunities for grants that we would pass along. We try to partner with other providers that are in the state that could offer up pilots or offer up services at a reduced cost for our rural hospitals. Matter of fact, I'm actually working with an organization now that is going to provide significantly reduced services, the cost for the services, the subscription services. They'll reduce the cost for qualifying organizations. And it's these partnerships, it's this acknowledgement, like you said, Michael, where we're saying that there is a challenge here and we're going to step up to the plate. We're going to offer discounted pricing, knowing that this is what will allow these hospitals to ultimately be able to serve their patients and provide secure networks, be able to hire the right workforce so that they can maintain what they have and they can kind of continue to move forward.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with like different hospitals in different locations are probably at different stages of their infrastructure, right? More rural could be a little bit, less developed, less ability to invest budget into it, et cetera. I'm going to shift a little bit here and I want to get your opinion, Stephen, while we have you on this development, this growth within technology in the healthcare space. And so with innovation comes technology, right? So we're hearing more about robotic surgeries, right? We're hearing more about, all of these new OT devices being introduced into the environment. And so with that, sounds great, right? We're making huge progress to have more data, more informedness, more preciseness, more innovation to provide the best level of healthcare out there as we progress. But how does that challenge you from a standpoint of all of these new pieces being introduced into your environment?
Mhm. Yeah, it's really interesting. I would say that the technology, the innovation curve, how fast it can move, and how some organizations are able to keep up a little bit better than others. I found a lot of value in hearing some of the use cases that some of the bigger organizations are able to document and share with the rest of the organizations in the state, particularly like we were mentioning earlier, the rural hospitals or those that are a little bit smaller. I think that we've been talking about AI. That's been a big topic. I think you mentioned Internet of Things, smart devices. We're seeing a lot more around wearables, all of this data being captured. Where do you put all that data? How do you keep it safe? How do you digest the data in order to create value back to the hospital? I know around AI, but we've talked about predictive analytics, but there's some concerns around hallucination. There's concerns around making sure that a human comes and observes the results so that we're still maintaining the safety of the patient. All of this is at play, and we need to continue to have conversations around this so that we can all learn together. It takes time for us to really get to a place where everyone's able to utilize and consume some of these new innovations. And so I'm always leaning on some of the trailblazers in the industry to build out their stories so that we can learn what failed and what worked. And I appreciate you guys bringing folks on to have conversations like this. Right now, what I've heard a lot about ambient listening. I don't know if you guys have had interactions with that, but ambient listening's been a big thing as far as improving the patient experience, allowing the nurses and the doctors to focus more on their patients and not so much on having to go through some of the administrative labor there. And so what I'm finding, just talking to our members, we're now able to do work that may have taken 3 or 4 people to do. We're now getting the hyper consolidated down to maybe 1 or 2 people can get to work through some of those automation. And they're just now just reviewing, making sure everything is as they expect it to work. And I'm optimistic we're going to see more of this innovation permeate throughout other areas of the hospital.
Wow. Yeah. You just made me think of this. A few years ago, my son broke his arm. And as we were leaving the orthopedic surgeon, I was sitting in the room, and the surgeon, who I actually know personally, was talking his notes into the system. So I know we've all gotten more comfortable with talk to text, etc. But in the context of importance, because now we've gotten it to a stage where we've trained it well enough that the accuracy is very accurate to depend on. And so I heard him talking all of his notes. Oh, patient had a broken bone here, and the remediation is this, and and I assume that he does that after every one of his patients, which cut down on the administrative input of having to do that and made him more efficient.
Yeah.
So it just spurred that kind of thought for leveraging kind of where we're going. And then obviously to your point around AI, you could take all that data into that massive data lake and see consistencies over what's the average time to heal for a broken arm? What's the typical remediation? Or is there any inconsistencies here? Are people doing it different? Are people seeing experiences, different results from different outputs or different diagnoses, et cetera? So I think there's a lot to add that value for when you have that pool of 180 hospitals, or I believe that's the number within the state of Georgia. Now all of a sudden you have a statistically significant pool to take that data and provide insights and input to continue to push us to get better.
Yeah. And in case you're just joining us, we're here with the Georgia Hospital Association CIO, Stephen McWilliams. And you talk about patient experience and how important that is. And sometimes it's about how exceptional was your experience. But sometimes, and I have family that works in healthcare, there can be occurrences that happen that are unthinkable, right? Where you have a potential psych patient that gets loose from custody. Maybe they weren't being accompanied properly within the hospital walls. And there becomes a physical actual altercation that happens. That's only alleged, Matt. Thank you very much. I haven't had my court date. Everybody gets that here in America.
He's pointing at me.
We're going to keep that for the final cut. Oh, he's to you?
No, I was pointing.
Yeah, yeah. You know, he was a he. If it was a he.
You saw immediately how that turned.
I got squirmy. I'm going to need some legal help here. But no, for real though. So you talked about patient experience. Let's talk about the physical safety concerns that are being addressed by technology and how that's shifting and playing a role.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that sometimes we do disconnect when we talk about cyber. That also includes the physical side as well. I've had a chance to work with some of the emergency preparedness teams, kind of going back to what you talked about when you have a crisis and you may have to go through lockdown. And so the emergency preparedness teams, we've broken the state up, it's broken up into different regions. And so we have opportunities to do drills, we do planning. And I think that is a very important aspect to making sure that when those things come up, we're prepared, we're able to respond. And so I'll be actually working with some of our hospitals, and I've done it in the past a little bit, but these tabletop exercises, they create that muscle memory. That's one aspect. I think another aspect is following best practices and making sure that you understand what best practices are. I train my team, for an example, when you key into the door, but you don't just let the person behind you walk in if they're not an authorized person. You make sure that they follow the procedure. And so when you stick to procedures and you have well thought out procedures, hopefully there's a good balancing between convenience and security. But when you have those best practices in place and you start to impact a person's habits, so they get into a habit of following best practices of safety, the best practices of responding to a crisis, best practices of utilizing your tools, go back to technology. Another aspect of this is a unified communication platform that's able to communicate effectively to all of the identified individuals who need to be notified and respond based on the plan. All of this plays into ultimately a better experience for the patient when something like this comes. And so, unfortunately, this does happen, and hopefully, we can learn when things don't go right. But I think at this point, even our rural hospitals, even they have to do the exact same tabletop exercises in preparation because what happens at the big hospitals can happen to them as well. And so that's why hopefully through finding the right partners and utilizing the right tools can enhance the person to be able to respond under stress effectively.
Stephen, I want to jump in on something here. And as technologists and people that are really passionate about the technology itself, it's, we're one side of the coin. We're one perspective here. If we zoom out, you're part of the leadership team at Georgia Hospital Association. I'm curious what you can share about leadership perspective of all of this technology. And because I think there's multiple sides of it. There's a ton of opportunity that is presented to the hospital association and healthcare systems in general with this type of technology, but there's also concerns and there's the scary side of it too. So what is the overall feeling, if you can share, from other leaders that are maybe not in technology? So the CEO of GHA and CEO of other healthcare systems, like what did they have to say? Are they really excited about all these developments? Or are they more scared of them?
I think the concern right now is the cost. The cost of everything is going up. And it sounds great to get all of this new technology in and how great it will impact patients in the hospitals capability, increased capability. But when it's all said and done, this all costs money. And everything that we have already that may have costed us before, the costs are going up. Right now, with the political climate, there's some uncertainty. Things are a little bit unpredictable. One day there may be some tariffs. Another day, maybe not. That's affecting supply chain. Supply chain, something that our leaders are talking about. Being able to meet payroll, being able to adjust when regulatory changes come down. We are just at the end of our session for downtown where laws are being passed, our general session, and our legislators and representatives are down there trying to do the right thing, protect the citizens of Georgia. And but some of those decisions impact the ability for hospitals or any other industry to be able to do what they're doing to serve their customers, serve their patient. And so standing back, just kind of looking over the big picture, I'm saying, okay, how can we keep costs low? How can we make sure our hospitals are financially resilient? And so technology can play into that in partnerships with organizations that can offer unique programs to offset some of that challenge is very important as well. but finding that and connecting those dots have been a challenge for me. And so we just have to continue to fight that fight and continue to keep our eyes, our ears open, and our minds open to thinking differently around solving some of these problems so that the costs can remain low and patient outcomes can remain high.
What you said right there on an executive level, an executive decision tree standpoint, I've made this comment in other industries before, and I think it's very true for the healthcare industry. Technology is at the core of every decision that's made nowadays, even if it is payroll. They're using a program, they're using some kind of software, they're using some kind of network to be able to communicate across the network, et cetera, and share. There's technology at every single decision that's made up there, and it's really amazing. We used to be a support, and now we're a strategic partner of that decision tree.
So I'm curious about your experiences with different vendors. And sometimes they get it right, and sometimes they maybe not so much. How would you and how do you approach those conversations with potential vendors? And if you don't mind, we'd love to hear about a good experience that you've had in the past.
Absolutely. Yeah, always are looking for opportunities to partner, build relationships with trusted organizations that have established a consistent pattern, putting their customers first, great communication, and demonstrating that they are focused on their mission, which is hopefully to change the world or make an impact in someone's life. I think, unfortunately, there are people that come by and try to exploit a bad situation. Obviously, some cyber incidents make the news. And the last thing you want to do is have a lot of vendors show up trying to come with, oh, I can fix this for you. And there's no relationship. So there's a lack of trust there. And that can be a challenge, especially when you're at your probably most vulnerable after the bit took place and everything is going, going left and right. And so I would say for me, I establish my relationships and then that takes time to do. It's a long game process. And I've heard our hospital members the same thing. When I'm in a place where I don't have the kind of resources available through the partnerships that are currently established, I will reach out to our hospital leaders. I will reach out to relationships that are already established to find out, okay, tell me about your relationship here solving this particular problem. And then that will allow me to kind of step into a new opportunity. I think engaging through organizations like the Georgia Hospital Association, we have events where partners that we have vetted or have had relationships with, we invite them to come to our events and get a chance to get to know our members. And because the credibility of the relationship that we've had, there can be some opportunities there. And other organizations that I sit on their boards and I'm involved with, opportunities there. Matter of fact, I'll be on stage with Michael here coming up, talking about the platforms. I'm in up here. Yeah, and those are opportunities for thought leadership. Again, opportunities for us to all learn from one another and then enter into these types of relationships where then we can build trust and then long it. I'll share a story with you. I used to work with a partner and unfortunately, the relationship ended up going in a different direction because of mergers and acquisitions. The organization ended up being purchased by someone else and then everything changed. But one thing that really stood out to me is I felt like every time I called this person, he was always available. It got to a point where I thought this was not usual. I actually would comment and say, okay, I'm calling you after hours on your work. I'm saying, okay, so when are you off? When do you get time to take a break? And the point of that is that I want people to not have free time and be able to deal with themselves. I think the point is that he demonstrated the mission, and I think that he set expectations very high. He's not perfect, but man, he grew the trust that I had with the organization so that when it's all said and done, he was my go-to guy. You almost became a friend. Yeah, at his point. He wasn't necessarily trying to push anything. We were just establishing a relationship. We were both trying to solve the same problems and we're doing it together. And he so happened to be an expert in this area. And so I believe our hospital is kind of the same thing. I think they have a lot of established relationships. And unfortunately, with the economic situation that we have now, some businesses, some partners may not be able to survive and others may get acquired and others will just continue to grow. And I just hope and I would challenge all partners that may be listening if you're able to kind of maintain through some of the choppy waters of it, whether it's the economic landscape or whether it's just growth, acquisition or mergers, if you're able to kind of transition that can still maintain those relationships, I think that could be opportunity for a win.
Man, Stephen, that is so dead on. Like at our recent innovation summit, I had the pleasure of spending time with some of our ecosystem of partners and manufacturer partners. And I said, core to what we do, there's three things. One is that people buy from people.
Mhm.
Two is that relationships matter. And then three is you cannot fast forward experiences, but experiences are what relationships are built on. So those experiences that you had with that gentleman or woman, or I'm not sure, which it was, but those experiences for them to be dependable and consistent and provide you with the knowledge that you need and give you that comfort from that experience, all of that led up to him or her being your go-to person. And so at the end of the day, it comes down to relationships. People think that AI is going to be the end of us and technology and things are going to take over us. But when it comes to working together and business, people buy from people. And we have that mantra here internally. And that's so awesome to hear you say that because it doesn't come down to ones and zeros and dollar signs at the end of it. When it's all in consideration and you're trying to do the best for the organization, it comes down to who do you trust? Who gives you that consistency that they're going to be able to deliver this, provide that value back to you? And it's really refreshing to hear you say that because sometimes we've seen people and we've heard about it as well as people have come to us and turned to us. They said, hey, I went with this person because they had this best price, but it's going to wind up costing me double because the price wasn't what I should have been focused on. It should have been focused on, am I dealing with the right organization? Am I dealing with the right partner? Am I solving the right things? Am I having the right solutions?
It's like when I bought those fake Jordans, Matt. It looked like real Jordans, but half price isn't always the best price. But for real, Steven, you said something really important, and that his or her accessibility and availability was their best ability, right? Because every time you needed something, they were there. You never felt like you were on the back burner. You never felt unimportant. And I think that is such a highlightable portion of this podcast is that building those relationships, Matt, and sustaining them and keeping them through all the shifts, right? Because those kinds of things are out of our control. But what is in our control is being able to answer that LinkedIn message, being able to answer that text, phone call, email, and so on and so forth. I just don't answer yours, Matt, because of other reasons. But for you, Steven, for you, Michael, yes, all day, every day.
We got a couple more here, and I know your time is precious, so we really appreciate it. If you have a couple minutes, we'd love to just ask a few more questions. Thinking about your time with GHA, you were there for 10 years. You got to live through one of the biggest, moments in the world, and especially impactful of technology, that being the COVID era, right? So you got into your role, you're there for a few years, 4, 3, 5, whatever, and you're progressing down that road. And then the world flips upside down with this super bug directly impacting everyone, but very much impacting the healthcare industry. What do you think COVID did to the IT space for hospitals and healthcare?
Yeah. Very unprecedented times. Never could have predicted that. I tell my team all the time, it's very hard to predict the future, even though that's what we're trying to do when we put our budget together. And that's what we try to do when we put our plans together. We're literally trying to predict the future. And my plan for that year was not to adjust to a pandemic and put all my budget line items to adjust for having to go and work remote. And we ended up selling our campus and people being sick and our hospitals needing us more than ever before. Didn't have that part of the plan. But what I can say is that plans are important. And I think that when I look at leadership overall and look at the IT leader, in the past, the IT leader may have been looked at as a note taker. They may have been looked at someone who just puts out fires. leaders today, I would say the IT leaders today really has transitioned for the most part into business leaders, thought leaders. They are the type of person that is contributing to the overall vision and direction of the organization. And so I found myself being a part unintentionally of that process when one day our leadership came to me and said, "Hey, what options do we have as we're trying to navigate this new challenge that we none of us saw coming?" And so you talked about innovation, not being afraid to do something new and different, even though there may not be a lot of priority on it. My success story that I like to share, it may be small for some, but it was big for us. But I know for a lot of our hospitals as well, they had to tackle this. And that was being able to have your IT teams work remotely, securely, and have the same type of access. When one day you were in the office, next day you're at home. And so for our team early on, I leveraged a previous crisis to remind our team of why there are certain decisions that need to be made. We need to make sure everybody has a laptop. We need to make sure that we have certain security in place before. And to be honest with you, my justification, like I said, was a previous crisis that we didn't foresee ever happening again. But I said, hey, we can't waste that crisis. We have to take the lessons learned and put them into place so that if it happens again, when it happens again, we neglected that opportunity. And the team that we had at the time, I guess I must have given enough information and I shared the story and I guess I had passion. I don't know. I guess maybe they're just open-minded. But they were willing to listen. And it wasn't just me, IT, trying to convince all of my peers and all of my leadership team that we should do this. No, I think they saw there was some value there. So luckily for us and a lot of our members as well, there were some things put in place. Like I said, we had the remote capability, that virtual aspect, that there was more regulatory there, but the opportunity was there. We had telemedicine. We didn't see a lot of movement before COVID. This now was accelerated. So we literally came through a crisis. We took what we were able to learn from previous crises, put them into action. We were able to adapt for the most part. It was a struggle. There was a lot of reporting requirements that our hospitals needed to do that they didn't have to do in the past, and we did support them and assisted them in that process. But when it was all said and done, I really think that we responded very well as a country as it relates to healthcare. I think we did the best we could with the situation we had. There were already challenges before COVID showed up. And now all this is being accelerated. And so we took advantage of the technology. Our hospitals, telehealth, from what I understand, increased tremendously, the use of it tremendously across the board. I think we saw innovations in other areas as well. Wearables became more important. I think possible at home. That's something that we've been talking about more so recently. Even your workforce and being able to hire people from outside of your city, abroad, throughout the country, and having them bring their expertise in to help. I mean, these are just things that we weren't necessarily putting as priority before, like we did when the pandemic showed up. And so these are some of the things that we've learned, that I've learned. And then I'm trying to carry these things forward for the next thing. We don't know what's going to happen. I have no clue what's going to happen later this year. But if we take what we've learned from our past and implement the lessons learned from those opportunities, they hopefully will set us up for opportunities to thrive even during a crisis.
And just really quick, I want to get to what your plans are. You said nobody can predict the future, but for the next 5 to 10 years. But before we get to that, you talked about the importance of those conversations in 2020. That's 5 years removed, right? Those are so important. Nobody can miss a line, right? And obviously collaboration platforms have changed since then and have evolved and grown. But if I can, for the bits and bytesers in the world, what is, if you have one, your favorite collaboration platform when you're having these important conversations with people across Georgia and maybe across the United States and abroad?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Spot. Yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite platform. I mean, depending on the relationship, I'll text people. I see them at events, email. That's turning into a little bit of a challenge just with all the security that needs to go around that being a vector of bad actors misusing email. But yeah, I use a variety of tools. I don't know if I have a favorite, but I think, like you said, particularly during emergency preparedness, and being able to plan and or exercise, create that muscle memory for when a crisis happens. How do we respond? Making sure we know who needs to be notified, when they need to be notified, having that communication platform and being trained on it so everyone knows how to use it correctly. I think those are all pivotal. You don't want to have to ask how to use a platform. How do I gain access? You don't want to ask those questions when the crisis is happening. And so that's where the power of the tabletop, the drill, we will call it, even like we talked about earlier, we should drill letting somebody in physically, letting a fail-safe fail. And then how do we respond to that? Practice that, because you know how they say, it's not if, but when. You can do everything right and still something bad happen. And I think we can't get comfortable. We always have to continue to know that it can happen to us. We're doing the best we can, but we always can do better. And we should just pace ourselves within reason so we can bring everybody along the journey with us and not leave anyone behind, because it's not going to just be IT. It's going to be the organization that's impacted when something happens.
Yeah, it's great.
Good.
I love it. You know, Stephen, we're really excited that you took time and appreciative that you took time to come and spend it with us for this last hour. I think our listeners are going to share along similar experiences, grow from your knowledge. Where are you guys going to be on stage together?
This is at a Georgia Hymns event.
Okay. And when is that? Do you guys know off the top of your head?
May 8th.
All right.
All right.
Yeah. So
Savannah, Georgia.
Georgia, we have the Georgia's state chapter of HIMSS in partnership with the Georgia Hospital Association. We'll be talking about the future, the trends of healthcare platforms. You're talking about EHRs. You're talking about cloud, AI, communications, security, and we'll be bringing leaders in to talk about, what do they think the future could look like? I think this is something, like you said, we do have to plan for the future, even though we can't predict it. But hopefully our plans and our preparation will ultimately be truly realized as the crisis come up. We can exercise those things and ultimately have better outcomes for all of us.
Yep, absolutely. And we are proud to be a partner of yours. We're excited to have this relationship. We're excited to continue to support the evolution of how our patients are treated and the better outcomes from all of the healthcare facilities. So, Stephen, thank you so much for being here. Bits and Bytes podcast, episode 17. We really, really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.